Welcome back, Pete. It's lovely to have you back again on the next part of our series in our podcasts for Clearview Intelligence. How have you been?
Good, thank you. Good to be back.
Good. It's great having you here. So a topic we're going to go on today is route safety. I know you know a lot about that, being head of technical sales at Clearview Intelligence. The first sort of incident we want to go through is Clearview Intelligence is known for innovative transport products and solutions. How do our technologies directly enhance route safety and deliver alike for pedestrians alike?
Okay. It's kind of interesting because a lot of the stuff that we've done didn't start off being a route safety scheme. Often somebody comes to us with a challenge. Often a local authority or whoever it is has found a problem. They get what they call cluster sites. So there's a problem in a particular area where they're having lots of collisions, and they say, what can we do? And they're thinking, do we reduce the speed limit? Do we do, there's lots of potential things they can do. And often they talk about what civil engineering, can we, increase the height of the curbs or put dragon's teeth in and all these other things that they can do, which are very kind of often work. In villages you have kind of gateway signs and all those things. But sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes they still have problems afterwards. So often they're coming to us saying, we've tried the civil engineering stuff, we've tried changing the road markings, we've tried changing the speed limit, but we're still having problems. So often it's a long conversation, that first conversation often. And I think one of the things that we are good at as a business, I think, is almost like as consultants. We've been doing this stuff for a long time. We've been around for over 50 years. So often we'll have had examples where you think you've got a unique problem, you've got a thing that you can't work out to fix it. Often we've done something similar and we've been able to offer a solution. I come back to what I said, I think, in the previous podcast about the fact that often our technology is based on detecting things. And often these scenarios are about detecting something and then warning somebody else about this thing that exists. So an example I might quote is that we did a scheme in a place called Stone Ferry Road in Hull. That's a fairly complex environment. It's a busy road. It's a Stone Ferry corridor, they actually call it. And there's a big mix of vehicles, from cars to very large HGVs. And the local authority wanted to encourage active travel down that route. So they wanted to, basically they widened the footpath and made it dual use for pedestrians and cyclists. And they put what they call tabletops in so that the cyclists could go straight along. When they got to a junction, they'd go straight over the junction because the road is raised for them to be able to go straight across it. And that was great. But the problem is there's vehicles going in and out of these side turnings. So they were coming to us saying, what can we do? How can we protect those cyclists? So coming back to the first point, it's all often about detection. So what we use a detection, we particularly use a thing called LiDAR to detect cyclists coming along the footpath. So the LiDAR it's a bit like radar but uses light. So there's a little green pillar. As the cyclist goes past it, we detect them. And then once we've detected the cyclist, we can then flash what we call IRS2s. They're road studs, so you might call them cat's eyes, that we flash in the road surface. So as a vehicle is approaching and as a cyclist goes past, we start to flash these studs that go across the neck of the junction. So if there's a vehicle coming out of it or going to turn into it, they see these flashing studs and it warns them. They may not know what it is that they're being warned about, but then a few seconds later the cyclist appears and then they kind of get it. But the key thing is they didn't need to be told what they're looking for. They just can see that there's a hazard there and they react differently. They slow down and they're trying to work out what the hazard is, and then they notice the cyclist. So there's a whole range of different things like that. So it's not always cyclists. It might be. We did a scheme up in the north somewhere where they were having problems with HGVs pulling out of a side turning. It was a dual carriageway road. So the vehicle would pull out of the side turning and would get to the central reservation and then have to wait for traffic coming on the other lane before they could join the traffic. But the problem is the rear end of the vehicle was still sticking out into the carriageway, and they had a couple of fatalities where cars were coming along and hit the rear end of that vehicle. So in that instance, what we did was detect that it's an HGV sitting there waiting at the turning. So if it's a small vehicle, a motorcycle or whatever, we just ignore it. But if there's an HGV there, we then detect that HGV. We also detect the approaching vehicles, and when we can see there's an HGV and there's an approaching vehicle, we flash a sign up saying, warning, turn in traffic. We continue to flash that sign until the HGV has gone past the central resolution and actually joined the traffic going in the opposite direction. So even when he's in the middle of the road and the rear end is sticking out, those signs are still flashing saying, beware, warning traffic, turn in traffic.
Perfect.
So these safety schemes tend to be quite varied. They'll often be looking at cyclists or pedestrians or high-speed vehicles or turning vehicles. There's a whole range of different things, and sometimes they're at a junction. Sometimes it's on a straight piece of road. It really depends on what we're looking for.
Thank you, Pete. That's a great answer, and it looks like we're saving people at the end of the day.
Indeed, yeah.
And that brings us on to the next question. It's sort of like, what ways do data and analytics, that sort of from Clearview Solutions, influence decisions about route safety and traffic management?
That kind of comes back to the first point that often the customer, whether it's a local authority or whether it's National Highways, often know they've got this cluster site. They know they've got this challenge, but they don't always know why it is. And just detecting stuff, I keep coming back to this detect, detecting stuff, whether it's the speed of vehicles, whether it's the volume of vehicles, whether it's the number of vehicles that's carrying out a particular movement, can often give them a clue as to why they're having that particular issue. Clearview's history is all about traffic data collection. We have our Insight platform, so we've got these devices that can collect data, and then you can run reports on it. So you can actually look at, how many vehicles are waiting to turn. When are those vehicles appearing? What's the mix of those vehicles? How many of them are HGVs? How many of them are cars, and so on? What's the speed of approaching vehicles? We've done some schemes where we actually remind drivers of the speed limit for their particular type of vehicle. So they're going along a road. This was particularly in Scotland. In Scotland, HGVs are restricted, I think, to 50 miles an hour. It might be 40 miles an hour. As an HGV is going along, we detect that they're an HGV. We measure the speed that they're travelling at. And if they're above the speed limit for that specific vehicle, we flash up a warning sign to remind them what their speed limit is. The next vehicle might be a car, and then we'll flash up a different warning sign because it's a different speed limit for that vehicle. So collecting this data and using it, it enables the local authority, the customer, whoever it happens to be, to understand better what's going on that bit of road network, so they can understand what the issue is, and then we can help them to put forward a solution that fixes that problem.
Thank you. A couple more questions I've got on the sort of route safety schemes is, how does Clearview Intelligence work with local governments or highway authorities to implement safety-focused technologies?
That's an interesting one, because often local authorities don't know how they're going to do this particular thing, whatever it is. We often act almost as a consultant, and we're not a consultancy. We don't charge for consultancy. This is all part of our kind of pre-sales process. But we're very happy to just go and have a conversation. One of the things when I'm presenting to groups of people, I always say, if there's anything you think we can help you with, let us know. We're happy to come and talk to you. We'll get a sheet of paper on the table. We can start sketching things. We'll do that just as part of the sales process. We're not going to charge you for that work. We can use our experience to help you in that instance. So often we get involved, and the key thing is getting involved early. If they have that conversation with us before they do anything else, we can often save them huge amounts of money, because often they will have done a load of civil engineering and they'll have put a load of signs up and they've done a whole load of things, and it's still not fixed the problem. If they get us involved very early on, we can help. I mentioned the scheme in Stoneferry Road. That came out of a completely random conversation about something else, and it just happened to come up in conversation that this is what they were trying to do. And we worked on it, and it went on for years, frankly, before we actually deployed anything in the road. That ended up meaning that Hull saved significant amounts of money. And when we deployed the scheme, it went in really well, really straightforwardly, and has been working great since then. So the key takeaway for me is get us involved early on. Even if you don't know whether we can help, have that conversation with us. And that applies to whether it's a parish council or whether it's National Highways. We often sit around a table and almost just workshop these things, try and understand what the challenge is and see how if we can add some value. Maybe we can't. Maybe we'll go, you know what, we can't help you here, and we'll have a cup of coffee and we'll leave. So,
I know you mentioned Stoneferry Road. Is there any other success stories that have come out of this? this?
Oh, loads of different schemes. I mean, I could bore you to death. One that immediately springs to mind, one that I particularly liked, was a place called Switch Island. It's up near Liverpool, and they were having problems with vehicles effectively losing their way around a junction. It's quite a complex. It's called Switch Island, but it's not a roundabout. It's a complex junction. I think there's 3 motorways and 2 A roads that turn up at this junction, so they're quite big roads. And people were, if you imagine sitting at a junction and you've got a dual carriageway road in front of you, you've got to go across quite a lot of lanes before you get to your lane. Yeah. And people were often turning short or too late, and you were getting side swipes, and people ended up facing oncoming traffic and all sorts of things. In that particular instance, we worked with the designers, and this was very early on when they were thinking about doing stuff at this junction, and we link these what we call IRS2, so dynamic road studs, so we can turn them on and off whenever we want to. So basically electric cat's eyes. Vehicles sit at a traffic light. When the lights are on red, you can't see anything. When the lights go green, we illuminate the studs in the ground, and we guide drivers around the junction. So it's almost like you've seen runways, and when you see aircraft taxiing on the taxiways, you can see all you can see is these dots of light. Well, that's what drivers see at this junction. Yeah. When the lights go green, the studs illuminating the road, and they guide people around the junction. That's reduced the number of collisions, these side swipes, but it's also increased the throughput from the junction, because people now, when the light go green, they feel confident pulling away from the stop line. So it's actually also reduced congestion at that junction. So it's there's a whole range, and there's lots of different schemes I could talk about, but there's lots of them, and they're so different. Sometimes they're little things, just a little junction in a parish council area. Sometimes it's a huge scheme like it was at Switch Island.
Sounds like many advantages.
Yeah.